because you can't train your biceps or your back or your legs or whatever body part you like to train that hard when your immune system is impaired. Welcome to Vigorous Performance Enhancing Drugs. I'm Coach Steve. Let's continue with the Primobolan profile video series and discuss the immune system. Now, I think I'll only get to the immune system in this video and not discuss red blood cell count, estrogen levels, sexual binding globulin levels, or anything else that changes in the blood work when you do decide to go on Primobolan, because the immune system is so big. And because Primobolan, the general bro consensus out there is that Primobolan is positively associated with the immune system. So let's just put it in this video with the Primobolan profile, even though most of the things I'll discuss in this video apply to all the anabolic androgenic steroids out there. But before we discuss how Primobolan might affect the immune system, let's discuss how the immune system actually works, purely from a biological perspective. The immune system doesn't only comprise white blood cells. It's also regulated by the lymphatic system, the spleen, the thymus, antibodies, and their corresponding complement system. So all these things you can't see in your blood work. You can see your white blood cell count and the white blood cell differential, of course. You can see the difference between leukocytes, neutrophils, eosinophils, etc. But the lymphatic system, or how the spleen affects your immune system, it's not really found on the blood work results. So let's discuss that first. White blood cells are predominantly produced in bone marrow, which is the same place where Primobolan promotes the production of red blood cells. So it might be able to promote the production of white blood cells as well. Lymphocytes in particular, they're also produced in the lymph nodes and the thymus. Now, lymphocytes in particular are very important to the immune system because they actually remember how to fight certain bacteria and viruses. The lymph nodes produce two kinds of lymphocytes, B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes, while the thymus only produces T lymphocytes, so there's two different kinds. Bone marrow also produces both B and T lymphocytes, but the bone marrow also produces neutrophils, eosinophils, and all the other white blood cells. Now keep in mind that white blood cells are one of the few blood cells which are actually active in the bloodstream and other parts of the body. And other blood cells like red blood cells, lipoproteins, or protein carriers like albumin or sexual binding globulin, they just transport. Red blood cells obviously transport oxygen, lipoproteins transport cholesterol and triglycerides, albumin transports a lot of different things, and sexual binding globulin transports sex hormones. White blood cells have a nuclei and androgen receptors, so they actually respond to free androgens in the blood if they're not bound to sexual binding globulin or albumin. So for the guys that like to have super high concentrations of anabolic steroids, testosterone, primobolan, trenbolone, etc. in the bloodstream, just remember that those androgens in the bloodstream might be able to attach to the white blood cell and instruct them how to respond to certain viruses or bacteria in a different way. Now, the nuclei within white blood cells, especially lymphocytes, will actually retain how to fight certain bacteria or viruses, and that's why they're called memory cells. Now, the lymphatic system is also very important in the immune system because it carries and transports lymph around the body. Lymph is very high in white blood cells. So you have the ordinary circulatory system that transports blood around with oxygen, lipoproteins, and sex hormones. And then you have the lymphatic system, which transports white blood cells around in lymph. It also helps to control fluid balance in the body. And you can stimulate the lymphatic system simply with activity. So this is another reason to do cardio every day upon waking, besides training your heart to climatize to this super physiological amount of body weight that you have, or to lose a little bit of body fat or stay lean during the off season. When you stimulate the lymphatic system, it helps to redistribute your body water favorably, so you don't have any weird symptoms of edema when you wake up. It helps to transport the lymph around, making sure that these B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes actually get transported around the body and are present in all tissues in case of a bacterial or viral infection. So let's say you got post-injection pain, probably not from pharmaceutical grade Bayer Primobolans, but if you went with underground methylene enanthate or methylene acetate, let's say you got post-injection pain, you fear that you're going to get an infection. The term walking it off actually applies, because by walking, you're promoting the lymphatic system to transport lymph, which contains white blood cells, helping you to fight the potential infection that occurs following post-injection pain. Now, here's a fun fact for you guys. The lymphatic system also transports sex hormones, neurosteroids, or anabolic androgenic steroids around the body. So if you go on a relatively high dose, the lymphatic system will promote the transport of free androgens through the body, and they will attach to the lymph nodes right here underneath the neck or in the armpit, in the groin. You're going to way too high dose for what your body can tolerate, and you're flooding your lymph nodes with androgens. What's going to happen? Hypertrophy, not hyperplasia, maybe if you're on growth hormone, but hypertrophy. And you'll see that with a lot of guys, especially when they're lean. Their lymph nodes are like a boiler. Now, that doesn't mean that your immune system is impaired or that you're fighting an infection or your white blood cell production is reduced. It just means that there's too many free androgens in your lymphatic system. And when that's too high, your lymph nodes will actually hypertrophy, swell up, and cause some inflammation. And it doesn't really look appealing. So when you're considering a D-ball kickstart or an anadrol kickstart or whatever oral kickstart people still run nowadays, it's a lot of free androgens, and it will certainly increase the lymph nodes if you decide to cycle like that. That's why I always advise people to slowly and incrementally build up their dosages so the lymphatic system doesn't get flooded by free androgens, and it can actually climatize a little bit to this increased amount of anabolic steroids, sex hormones, neurosteroids in the blood and in the lymphatic system. So please keep that in mind. Now, the immune system doesn't only work on white blood cells or the lymphatic system or the thymus. Antibodies are involved, which use a complement system of several different proteins which help to fight certain bacteria and viruses. These antibodies are produced by the spleen. The spleen also produces lymphocytes, but it's at a much smaller amount compared to the bone marrow, lymphatic system, or the thymus. The spleen helps to filter the blood in the same way that the kidneys filter the blood. The spleen filter microbes and red blood cells, while the kidneys filter metabolic waste products. So the spleen highly contributes to the immune system as well. Now, besides these organs, the skin, the lungs, and the intestinal tract also play a very important role in the immune system, purely from a defensive perspective. Saliva, sebum, the oily part of your skin, both have antimicrobial properties. Same counts for the mucus in your lungs. And of course, stomach acid is a huge defensive barrier because it pretty much dissolves everything. Now, when you pierce the skin and you're passing this defensive barrier, you might cause an infection. So all the administration techniques that we use in bodybuilding, hopefully you're practicing safe and sterile administration techniques. You're simply bypassing part of the immune system. And it's almost the same with oral steroids, and it doesn't happen directly. The oral steroids might alter stomach acidity levels, and you can actually exacerbate that by taking a proton pump inhibitor, which I'm absolutely against. If you have digestive issues because of oral steroids, you should take apple cider vinegar or betaine with pepsin to complement stomach acid production, not reduce it with a proton pump inhibitor, because now you're, again, impairing or reducing the protective barrier that's part of the immune system, which helps to dissolve these microbes or viruses. So please consider that if you ever decide to take oral steroids and you have digestive issues, apple cider vinegar, betaine, and pepsin, not a proton pump inhibitor. So when you're piercing the skin and you're injecting foreign bodies, Primobolan or any other performance-enhancing drug through the injectable route, you're bypassing the immune system and you might cause an infection. You can easily see this on the white blood cell differential. You'll see that the eosinophil percentage generally tends to go up with more frequent injections, even if you practice safe and sterile administration techniques. The more injections you perform, whether that's intramuscular oil-based injections or subcutaneous water-based injections, the more often you're piercing your skin, the higher the eosinophil percentage of the white blood cell differential tends to shift towards to. So the neutrophils might still be in range, the monocytes might still be in range, the lymphocytes, the basophils, those might all still be in range, but the eosinophils might go up. So you're bypassing the immune system with the injectable administration route. You generally don't see that with oral steroids. It doesn't affect your white blood cell differential, but you're still impairing the barrier if you're changing your stomach acidity levels. So how does Primobolan all affect this? Well, the reason why Primobolan is positively associated with the immune system is because in several studies, when Primobolan was prescribed and researched in cases of HIV positive patients, white blood cell count went up and T lymphocyte count went up. In patients who are HIV positive and acquire immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, because HIV attacks certain cells of the immune system directly, resulting in the overall effectiveness of the immune system, when they were prescribed Primobolan, white blood cell count increased or restored to sufficient levels, and T lymphocyte concentrations restored to sufficient levels as well. Keep in mind that HIV positive patients are on a lot of different kinds of medication, but that's the only scenario where Primobolan was shown to increase or restore the immune system somewhat. Again, HIV positive is something you live with, and I don't think as of now it's 100% curable. I know there's cases where people are cured, but unfortunately, it's not the case for everybody. So it's something you keep under control when you're HIV positive, and Primobolan was shown to help in that scenario. So in a sense, it's true that Primobolan boosts the immune system, but it's only been shown in cases where the immune system is impaired because of AIDS. So please keep that in mind. If you're perfectly healthy and you don't suffer from AIDS, I don't think Primobolan is going to do much for the immune system overall. But I will say this. I went through all of my blood work when I was running Primobolan and all of my clients' blood work when they were running Primobolan on top of whatever other compounds they were using at that time at various dosages. When Primobolan is part of the performance-enhancing drug protocol, white blood cell count doesn't reduce as much as a comparable amount of testosterone, trenbolone, masterone, boldenone, any other compound for the same amount of milligrams. And especially with trenbolone, where white blood cell count is really reduced simply because it's such a strong androgen. And again, white blood cells have androgen receptors, so some of the trenbolone is going to attach to the reduced amount of white blood cells that you have and change how they function or shorten the duration of their active life. So in cases where Primobolan was used, the white blood cell count, the differential was the same, but the white blood cell count, I can draw a conclusion that's a little bit higher. Now, a little bit higher, I mean maybe 500 cells per cubic meter compared to a baseline reading without Primobolan. Does that come because Primobolan is not as androgenic compared to some of the other compounds? Again, its androgenic rating is maybe half that of testosterone and negligible when you compare it to trenbolone. So is it because the androgenic rating of Primobolan is so much lower, preventing the reduction of white blood cells in the blood? Or does Primobolan promote white blood cell production in the bone marrow, in the lymphatic system, in the spleen, or in the thymus, and raises it through that mechanism? My white blood cell count hovers around 5,000 to 5,500 cells per cubic meter when I add Primobolan in my cycle, and I feel that the cycles of my clients were pretty much comparable. And without it, I would hover around 4,500 to 5,000. So it's a little bit of a difference, but it is noticeable. And keep in mind that from 5,000 to 5,500 cells per cubic meter, that's a 10% increase. So does Primobolan increase your white blood cell count by 10%? I think that it just reduces it less. That's what I feel. I feel that Primobolan just reduces the overall white blood cell count concentration within the bloodstream less compared to other anabolic androgenic steroids, which have much higher levels of androgenicity. And even a reasonably comparable compound, boldenone, has a slightly higher androgenicity compared to Primobolan. So you see that the white blood cell count is a little bit lower on boldenone compared to Primobolan. So I purely think it's from a reduction perspective, and Primobolan appears to reduce white blood cell count when you're already on testosterone or other compounds. Primobolan reduces white blood cell count less compared to anything else on a milligram for milligram basis. Now, most of the anabolic steroids have been shown to be slightly or reasonably immunosuppressive. So in most cases, you'll see that white blood cell count goes down and the immune system is impaired slightly when you go on cycle, and it was shown in a dose-dependent fashion. But also keep in mind, what was not researched in these scenarios is micronutrients. Zinc, for example, plays a very important role in the immune system, but zinc is also used in DNA transcription or DNA cloning. When you create hyperplasia, when you're on growth hormone, for example, hyperplasia occurs and the cell divides, a lot of zinc is utilized in this process. So when you're promoting a lot of hypertrophy, hyperplasia, cell growth, gene transcription, etc., you're going through your zinc. And now you're depleting your zinc, so it can't be used in the immune system anymore. And there are many other micronutrients which play an essential role in the immune system, but are also readily used in anabolic processes. So the more anabolism you promote, the more micronutrients you need to supply. So whether your performance-enhancing drugs contain testosterone, primobolan, growth hormone, any kind of performance-enhancing drugs, if you don't want the micronutrients to be taken away from the immune system, you need to make sure that you are in a micronutrient surplus at all times. Whether you're in a caloric surplus or a caloric restriction, you always need to be in a micronutrient surplus so you don't take the micronutrients away from the immune system just to grow your bicep, because you can't train your biceps or your back or your legs, whatever body part you like to train, that hard when your immune system is impaired and you get sick and you're just laying in bed cursing at the sky because you forgot to take your zinc. So I think this is everything that you need to know about the immune system in relation to Primobolan. Again, it applies to many of the other anabolic steroids that are out there. To sum it all up, I think that Primobolan suppresses the immune system the least compared to all the other anabolic androgenic steroids that are out there. It might be suitable if you're an HIV positive patient when you actually need to raise white blood cell concentrations and T lymphocyte concentrations to keep your immune system functional. If you're on Primobolan or you decide to add it to your performance enhancing drug protocol, make sure you add some zinc and make sure that you're always in a micronutrient surplus so you don't create any immunosuppression through a micronutrient deficiency. I think this Primobolan profile is going to turn into a Primobolan Shark Week. So the next video will be how Primobolan affects red blood cell production, and I'll compare that a little bit to boldenone and trenbolone, which are all both known to increase red blood cell production as well, even though only Primobolan is medically prescribed in 2 countries, Turkey and Spain, like we mentioned in the previous video. So that will be the next one. It will probably be a single video as well. And then the third video about how Primobolan affects your blood work will be the estrogen, the sex hormone binding globulin, and the lipids, which are all functionally related. Yeah? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next Primobolan Shark Week video.